Chapter 2. The Wood of the Dead. Elpis had removed his bandages and was relaxing in a stream shaded by thicket. Primum was resting nearby. They had been travelling for nearly 5 days with little rest. Primum had insisted they stay away from open fields, instead carefully traversing rough country while taking time to throw off their pursuers. Sightings of them had become less frequent. For the previous 2 days they could see smoke from campfires along the valley, but today there were no signs of human life within the woods. Elpis's feet, while scabbed, were no longer bleeding. Not only was he able to put weight on them, but he could even walk short distances. Elpis wanted to take advantage and forage for food. However, despite his attempts, he had little knowledge of forestry and could not distinguish edible plants. Pondering what to do with his little downtime, he sat in the stream looking up at the sky aimlessly, when suddenly he felt a peculiar nibbling sensation at his feet. He looked down at the water to see small guppies eating the scabs from his feet. Elpis had an epiphany. He hobbled to Primum and searched his bag. Finding a small hand knife, he grabbed it and went to a small tree by the stream, cutting a sturdy branch. He began to outfit it into a small spear. Once finished, he moved into a deeper part of the stream, closer to the big rocks where he hoped larger fish might be drawn to the smaller ones, or to him. He waited patiently, trying to stay still, though he jerked and wriggled his toes whenever too many fish began to overwhelm his senses. Finally, he saw a fish. He stilled every part of his body, holding the spear with both hands. The fish drew closer, almost within reach. The tickling was unbearable, but he needed only an inch more. Then suddenly, it came in range. No hesitation, he struck and missed. Elpis kicked the water in frustration. "That was a pretty nice strike, except when you missed," said Primum, standing with his arms crossed on the bank of the creek. Elpis turned toward him with a childish frown. No, I'm not mocking you." Primum chuckled. "I'm saying you did a great job. You just missed. Your instincts are good, great stance, and you'll catch one. You just have to think about where and when you strike next time." Elpis looked at Primum, perplexed. Primum squatted to the ground and said, "See, when you struck where the fish was. But a fish in water is much faster than you'll ever be. You may eventually catch one through brute force, but you'll catch more if you use your head. The fish will flee the second it senses you move. So next time, study it. Look at how it moves. Does it favor one side? Jump left or right? Predict where it'll be and hit that spot. Sit still and be quiet. Let's see if another fish comes by soon." Elpis waited once again. The small fish began to nibble at his feet, and he stilled himself. Then, from up the creek, another fish came. "My soon-to-be dinner," Elpis said confidently to himself. He lay in wait again, studying it. The fish danced through the water, but, just as Primum said, it liked to sway to the right whenever it moved. He aimed, adjusted slightly to the right, and impaled the fish. He raised his spear and screamed, "I caught it! I caught it!" Primum clapped in excitement. "I can't believe you did it your first try. Gorthok, the fish slayer." Elpis rolled his eyes. "All right, try and catch a few more fish, Elpis. I'm gonna set up camp. Figure they're a couple days behind us. Might as well take advantage and finally eat." Elpis, already focused on catching more fish, simply nodded before bringing his full attention back to the stream. As the day went on, Primum returned to the stream to check on Elpis, gathering mud from the bank and collecting the fish Elpis caught in his makeshift basket. Elpis hardly responded, too absorbed in the thrill of his first hunt. He felt a tremendous sense of pride, not only in catching the fish, but in finally being able to help Primum, who had taken on such a heavy burden assisting him. Though Primum never mentioned the danger he had put himself in by helping, Elpis had caught glimpses behind the man's chuckles and quips, signs of concern and focus these past few days. Finally, Primum came to gather him. "It's the words you've been wanting to hear. It's time to eat." Elpis rushed out of the water, tripping over himself in excitement. He had forgotten about his injuries. Primum grabbed him by the scruff of his tattered garments and threw him over his shoulder. "Come on, fish slayer, let's dry your clothes." They gathered by a dugout, where Primum had lit a small fire. He'd been tending it to keep the smoke low. It was mostly coal and ash, but after days wandering in the cold, any warmth was welcome. He had fashioned a clay lid, which he placed over the hottest part of the fire, then delicately laid the fish inside. On the other side, he had a rusted pot filled with water. "Why are you putting water on the fire?" Elpis asked. "It's important to heat your water when you can. It's the only way to make sure it's clean," Primum explained, as he fanned the coals under the clay lid. "How much longer till we reach a township?" Elpis asked again, trying to make small talk. "Well, at our pace, probably another day, but we won't be able to go directly into town once we reach it." "Why not?" Elpis asked curtly. "You know where we are, Elpis." Primum drew his attention from the fire to glance at him. "Before you say something silly, I can already see your face going red, ready to blurt out the woods. I mean the continent, the ground you hobble on." Primum let out a half-smile before looking back to Elpis. "I'm not sure. I guess I never thought of it." Primum took a serious look at him. "How much do you know about the world?" Elpis pondered for a moment, then responded, "Well, I know that we're on the planet Tiaris. The red moon is Perseline, and the silver moon is named after the goddess Effin. There are 8 continents. I don't remember all their names, though. Just Aios because of the Empire, and Yivregis because all the epic dragon stories are from there." Primum nodded a few times. "Well, you know a decent amount. I'm surprised you'd know anything about the Imperium out here." Elpis looked down. "That was one of the things I was forced to learn. They didn't like the goddess or the Empire, especially the messenger." Primum caught Elpis's gaze. "Fresh wounds need time, especially wounds of the heart. Let's not dwell on those memories, boy. Focus on now, because what I'm about to tell you is important." Primum sat and stretched his feet toward the fire. "Where we are, Elpis, is quite literally the worst place to be. This land is considered by most to be uninhabitable. I won't mince words. Every day we're here, we're in danger, and unfortunately your pursuers are the least of our worries. We're in the continent of Notos Ager, the Southland, the Empire calls it. They've been trying to tame it for centuries. Those who live here have another name for these ancient lands. Isomnem Silvas, the wood of the dead." Elpis stayed quiet, searching Primum's face for a hint of jest, but Primum's eyes remained fixed, alerting him to the severity of their situation. "I didn't want to concern you, especially while you were injured. I figured it best to let you adjust to the wilderness. I must admit, we've been much luckier than I anticipated. But I'm a superstitious man, so that tells me our ordeals are only going to be that much greater when they come. And I promise you, they will come." Elpis gave a blank stare, unsure how to respond. There was a pause before he finally gathered a thought and blurted out, "Well, you say it's dangerous, But what about this place is so bad? Why is it called the Wood of the Dead? Primum began removing the fish from the fire, tossing one to Elpis before responding. Everything about this place is wrong, unholy, evil, and just downright unpleasant. Unpleasant is just the weather. Luckily it's summer, thank the goddess, or we'd have to contend with ice and freezing rain. Despite that, this place is notorious for weather phenomena that would rip apart cities. At any point, the ground can literally tear beneath you, or worse. We could run into the night fog. Night fog? Elpis interjected. The valley contains swamps that release gas from the bogs. The gas is deadly and can quickly overwhelm you with little warning. It's as sudden as fog. Ah, Elpis nodded nervously. Primum began to take a bite of the fish, while still speaking casually about the horrors that awaited them. The woods have been our savior for now, but there are countless ancient horrors that inhabit these woods. This is the least of my concern. I had to spend an unfortunate time of my youth here, so I know which woods to avoid. Ancient horrors are also afraid of other horrors, so at least we have that. Told you, you're old, Elpis quipped. Primum flashed a smile, then just as quickly went back to his focused look. Focus. I'm almost done. Now, as long as we avoid particular woods, we should be fine. I'm more concerned if your pursuers catch our trail and we veer off course. Well, then we may have an unfortunate meeting. Mostly, though, I just want you to be aware that these woods are dangerous, and to keep alert, even when we are eating this fine meal far from other life. Primum reached for another fish after devouring his first. Elpis could not even reach for the fish he had been given. He was too focused on Primum's words. Unknown to Primum, however, the lecture had the opposite effect on Elpis. At first he felt intense dread and fear, but through Primum's talk, he suddenly yearned for adventure. The monotony of the past 5 days had lacked thrill, and Elpis could not help thinking of conquering a swamp filled with ancient horrors. He quickly collected his thoughts as Primum snapped his fingers to call Elpis back. Hey! Focus, boy. This is the important part. Let me ask you, Elpis, what kind of people do you think would live in a place like this? Elpis pondered. I'm not sure. Primum reached for another fish while tossing the bones of the one he had just devoured. Exiles and ancient tribes. Neither group is particularly welcoming to strangers. Neither group is known to take pity on a child, and neither group is known to be honorable. Elpis interjected, I would have always figured that tribes were honorable at least. This isn't like one of your dragon stories. Primum grabbed the conversation back rather aggressively. These tribes worship an ancient deity, even before there was worship of the goddess. The death god Vane. Elpis perked up. He was familiar with the topic. He had the displeasure of studying much religion during his time in captivity. Yeah, I know of Vane, but why would anyone worship him now? The first messenger killed him almost 1,000 years ago. Not to mention he is a lesser deity. He has no power over human souls. He only had dominion over the lesser creatures. Right you are, and full of surprises, Primum said, while still carelessly looking into the sky and rubbing his belly. But Vani is not dead. Weakened, yes, but he serves another master, and his master would not let such an important subordinate die. Before he could continue, Elpis quietly spoke. I know him. I know him well. Azriel, the eternal dreamer. Primum shot up from the ground. He stared intensely at Elpis. There was a long pause before he finally spoke in a grim tone. Who told you that name? Elpis noticed Primum's intense gaze and felt a chill run down his spine. He stammered to speak a simple sentence. They told me. Who is they? Primum said in an elevated tone. I don't know who they are. They always had me in that hut. They taught me how to read, and after that I would hardly ever see them. It was different people who would come to bring my study materials and food. After that they never spoke to me, never told me their names. Nothing. I swear Elpis spoke in a panic. What did you read? Primum asked in a calmer voice. Elpis could not help but still feel fear from Primum's initial reaction. He thought, I am afraid to say much more. He paused. I don't wish to mention the master or the nice woman, but if I don't give him a detailed answer, he will sense I am withholding information. Primum may question further. I need to find a way to change the subject. I read books about religion, society, the empire, math, and astronomy. If I did well, I got to read adventure stories. Primum took another pause, then stood and sat next to Elpis. His face was long but apologetic. I am sorry if I scared you. It's just that name is not common knowledge, and something you should avoid speaking about, even in company you trust. Primum let out a deep sigh. That god corrupts everything it touches. It was decided many centuries ago that civilization would be better purging his name from history. Those who know of his name are never to be trusted. You will quickly make an enemy if they recognize that name. And if they don't, others will surely look for you to find out how you came across it. Pretend you don't know it, and never mention that name again. Elpis nodded. I won't mention that name again. I never liked it anyways. Primum smiled. Good man. Now, back to the conversation we were having. The cultists believe that even though their god is long gone, if they make sacrifices to him, they can resurrect him. Many of these tribal leaders practice a lost art of aura magic called necromancy. Witch hunters have killed most of the necromancers on the mainlands, but here they still exist. Although much rarer now than in the past, they still lurk here. If we run into a village under the protection of a necromancer, well, we would be better off with the night fog. Elpis finally began to eat. He took a few bites before repeating back what Primum had said. So the weather is awful, there are monsters everywhere, and the people are insane. Primum laughed. That sums it up. He shook his head while turning the coals. I had an old traveling companion, and any time the odds were stacked against us, he would say something. I feel like now is an apt time to say, we are between a blacksmith's arsehole. Primum chuckled to himself. Elpis let out a quick laugh and said, Yeah, you forgot to mention all the people chasing me. Primum stood and began packing his bag, making jokes while moving around the campsite. Elpis finished his food and helped snuff out the flames. The sun was setting. It was time for them to head out. Primum grabbed Elpis and saddled him in. He turned and gave an exaggerated smile. Don't worry, Elpis. I am a bona fide badass. This isn't even an adventure, just a hike for me. Elpis giggled. I trust you, old man. Primum gave a reassuring smile and began walking. Despite his reassurances, the earlier conversation weighed on Elpis's mind. As sunset completed, the woods, never welcoming, became foreboding. Primum had insisted on silence during their travels, and now Elpis noticed the unnatural quiet of the trees. It didn't help that Primum, despite his bulky armor, was adept at walking lightly and quietly through the forest. The still silence of the night was broken only by the occasional clink of Primum's ringmail across his plate armor. Elpis could hardly make out Primum's face. The canopy swallowed most of the moonlight. He tried to sleep, but the discomfort from his wounds and Primum's movement, along with the eerie hush, made dozing difficult. Elpis suddenly heard a soft string instrument in the distance and the crackle of a fire. He opened his eyes. He was sitting in a chair in a dimly lit room. In front of him was a rather grand dining table. To his left he saw a fireplace, and over the mantel many trophies, heads of curious creatures. The room was painted an elaborate burgundy with gold frescoes. He saw a man sitting across from him, lit by candlelight next to a bountiful meal. The man wore a red embroidered robe of intricate material, nicer than anything Elpis had ever seen. His hair was slicked back, short and well-groomed. He had a graying goatee and a styled moustache. He had a commanding presence. The man looked up from his plate, shooting a piercing look at Elpis with deep black eyes. Elpis tried to speak, but words would not leave his lips. He felt as if he had no air to fill his lungs, yet he did not feel suffocated. The man spoke. "Oh, so you must be the one causing this commotion. I expected more." Elpis tried to move his hands to signal he could not talk, but his arms felt heavy, as if held down by the earth itself. The man spoke again. "I do not appreciate your master's kind on my lands. I ask that you leave immediately." Elpis scanned the room, trying to locate Primum and make sense of where he was. Could Primum have betrayed me? He wondered. "I wish to eat my meal alone. I did not prepare for guests today. Oh, but do tell your companion I'm expecting him." Elpis stared intently at the man. Suddenly his vision dimmed and a jolt hit his core. He gasped. Primum tapped him, put a finger to his mouth, and quietly whispered, "Shh." Elpis looked around and realized they were back in the forest. It had been an odd dream. He noticed they were crouched beneath a small cliff, hidden between the outstretched roots of a tree directly above them. The forest was quiet, but not the eerie stillness from before. There was movement now. They sat for a few minutes until faint shouts reached them. Primum looked through the roots. The tree overlooked a small clearing. Both Elpis and Primum could make out shadows of torchlight along the tree line. Then they heard the clomping of horses coming from the clearing. Primum quickly pulled them deeper under the roots and stayed out of sight. They waited as the horses approached, and then halted. Why would they stop here, of all places? Elpis wondered. He heard a gruff voice from the clearing. "Where is the scout leader?" A woman's voice responded, softer in tone. "If a boy is too much for our scoutmaster, why would you expect anything else of him? Praetor." The man responded in an annoyed tone. "The incompetence of these fools. If they had any idea how important the boy was to the master, they would be shitting themselves from fear every second that boy is gone." The woman laughed. "You flayed half the watch. What more fear is left to instill? You simply made an error in recruiting these bumbling moronic wildlings." "Enough, witch. You said you sensed something. Is it still near?" The woman answered in an aggravated tone. "No. The presence is gone." Suddenly someone shouted to the right of Primum and Elpis, "We found something, Praetor." Primum shifted deeper into the roots, staying out of sight of the voice. "Ah, Scoutmaster. Nice of you to join us," Praetor said. Elpis could hear footsteps approaching the clearing. His heart raced. He tried to control his breathing. He felt as though his heart might burst from his chest. Primum tapped him and mouthed the letters. "Bony-fied badass." Elpis's attention shifted to the scout, who spoke in a prostrate tone. "Forgive me, my lord. We have found evidence of a campsite 3 miles to the south. The gruff voice of the praetor roared, "Wonderful! You found the child, then?" The scout replied, "Not yet, my lord, but we are nen." Suddenly Elpis heard a loud thud striking flesh. The gruff voice yelled, "Search the forest top to bottom. If that boy is not returned to me by dawn, I will hunt each of you down across Terrace and end your miserable lives personally." Elpis could hear frantic shouting from the forest tree line. Then the praetor spoke again. "Come, we must return to camp. We need to keep an eye on the Empire's convoy. I don't think it's a coincidence they are snooping around here." Elpis heard the horses gallop off into the distance. Slowly, he felt the blood return to his face. Primum carefully overlooked the clearing and saw the mangled body of the scout on the ground. Light moved across the clearing as a mass of people rushed forward. He turned to Elpis. "We must be quick. They will find us soon." Primum stayed low to the ground. Firelight shadows flickered on the cliff above them. He moved gracefully from tree to tree. Elpis and Primum could hear shouts, "Check the ridge! Sweep the clearing!" Elpis watched Primum's feet cross from tree to tree. His ears started ringing. He remembered running through the forest. He tried to breathe, but felt he couldn't get enough air. His mind raced. "They are so close," he thought. His hands and knees began to tremble. He snapped out of it when an ear-piercing roar split the night. "Roar!" Elpis looked to Primum. Primum turned. "Time for stealth is over. We gotta run." Scattered screams came from the forest. The torchlight swelled into a blaze as the dark abyss suddenly lit with ember and smoke. Primum jumped over the ridgeline and slid down into the clearing. 2 men garbed in leather pelts screamed, "We found the boy!" Before they could call out to the rest of the search party, another ear-piercing scream bellowed from behind the clearing. From above the smoke and fire rose an unholy beast. It towered above the trees. Its face was a deer skull, jaw open and bloodied, filled with jagged teeth the size of a man. Its body was tall and gaunt, a blend of flesh and root, and its hands were similar to a man's, but tipped with claws, unlike anything describable. Elpis stared in pure horror. The 2 men behind him screamed, "Windigo!" Primum sprinted forward. He turned to Elpis with a humorless grin and said, "And so it begins.